Thank you to all of you for joining us for yet another webinar in our series. We really appreciate your being here and our audience online. Today we're hearing one more time from Sylvia Perry, who is no stranger to any of us, our former international president, former BPW UK president, and for I don't know how long, but for some time involved in the history committee of our organization, as well as a lot of other accolades. Sylvia, maybe when you begin, you can tell us whatever I've left out, but we certainly thank you for being here, and I'm going to turn it over. The floor is now yours.
Thank you very much, Anne, and good day to you all. I'll use that day instead of any time of the day. Bringing the international history up to date has been a big ask, and I've had to leave out more than I could include. So I'll start today where I ended before, with Pat Harrison at the 2002 Melbourne Congress, a World of Peace. But I'm going to take a moment to say a few words of tribute about Judith Vanunen, who was the Australian national president who bid for and hosted that Congress, but she sadly died on the 27th of May. Judith was a very special person and an inspiring woman. She radiated warmth, fun and friendliness, and all that was very evident in her welcome in 2002. Judith's energy and enthusiasm in all she did made her an outstanding dynamic leader and advocate. It was a joy to know her and to remember her with affection. The theme of the 2002 Congress could not have been more appropriate following the events of 9/11 the year before, when New York suffered a devastating attack. Pat told the conference how the Peace Initiative started just a month ago at a conference she attended for 100 selected influential women, of which Pat was one, in Sharm el-Sheikh. Pat felt that meeting was the beginning of the grassroots movement to initiate the Security Council Resolution 1325 and change the world thinking from a world of conflict to a world of peace. The conference report confirmed that the Vancouver proposals had been introduced. Especially beneficial had been the restructuring of the executive. Other positive steps were the establishment of sub-regional groups. They've been put into use very effectively now. A change of the fiscal year to match the calendar year. Fees variation, now only change in 3 years instead of annually. And international currency rate changed from sterling to euros. The Melbourne Conference had been the first to last for 7 days, but most people said it would be satisfied with a 4-day Congress with lower costs. So that was considered for the future. So taking over was Antoinette Ruegger from Switzerland, the first vice president, who was president for the years 2002 to 2005. Antoinette's plan for her triennium concentrated on 3 main issues: communications, systemic membership development, and finance. In order to strengthen the international structure and efficiency, Antoinette developed and used digital tools, including a membership management tool, to give networks the opportunity to manage data in a more efficient manner, also to create a digital directory. Well, they had a website which Sharon Selkirk had initiated and developed over the last 6 years, and that was renewed. The intranet with its password protected rooms were also started with Sharon, was continued and helped accessibility. Antoinette also established a digital program for projects and events for clubs, federation and standing committees to show their projects, experience and know-how. The opportunity for all members to register and attend as observers at the CSW conference in New York was increased, and Vice President John Chanuk Viravan organised the breakfast briefings and workshops for the members attending. And to stimulate income, fundraising task force, chaired by Liz Benham, was set up. That conference of 2005 was in Lucerne with the title of New Dimensions of Leadership. The programme for the opening ceremony celebrated the 75th anniversary of IFBPW and featured musical highlights by young opera singers, members of the International Opera Studio from Zurich. Registers were given a VBL, and I don't know what those initials stand for, card, to ride free of charge on the network of buses on the efficient Swiss transport network. And at that Congress, the business session, there were some successful resolutions. One was for a new BPW logo to show a more balanced view of the 5 regions on our badges. You can see that more effectively on a black and white, the black and gold one. Italian came in as an official language, and the study of Congress management, looking at the contract between the host country and the International Federation, was looked at and resolved. So the organisational review was another motion that was adopted. This was the start of a long-term strategic policy, a modern constitution and bylaws. And they introduced new memberships awards for affiliate increases in membership to try to get people to encourage them to go out and gain members. There were more delights for the friends and fellows when we went first on a boat, then took a train to the top of the Regain mountain for an alpine buffet. And for the farewell party, another unusual event, paddle steamers on the beautiful lake in Lucerne were used. Chancharak Viravan Nok, as I will refer to her, from Thailand, was elected for the next term, 2005 and 2008, becoming the then youngest international president and the first from Asia. I think we all know how ambitious and hardworking Nok is, and certainly her term demonstrated that. Her vision was to ensure that BPW International would be one of the most influential women's networks for decades to come. Her goals for the organisation were for its members to be identified by their high values, that it would grow and continue to make a difference and be an organisation that will be professionally managed and financially sustained. So the venue for her Congress was Mexico City, which is the oldest metropolis on the American continent, which includes some beautiful historic palaces and 3 UNESCO declared World Heritage Sites. Every Congress has its special moments and events. For me, outstanding was a tour of Parliament and luncheon for the BPW International members and for the board and for other invited BPW members. We all had front seats, and during the visit, members of the BPW International's executive were introduced to the members of Parliament, an honour typically only reserved for heads of state and ambassadors. So we were well regarded there. And as is the Mexican style, later that day, the mayor's reception gave all members the opportunity to enjoy the historical past of Mexico City, but with food, fun and dancing. There's plenty of music every day in the streets surrounding the Congress Hotel. Masses of workers were on strike, and every day they held protest rallies complete with the mariachi bands that are part of the Mexican character. So retreating at lunchtime to my room balcony with the BPW team to do our strategy planning, it was always against the background of this daily rendition just down the street. One of NOC's best initiatives was Beyond 2000, Helping Women to Help Themselves Award, which he started in 1997 and rolled forward Congress by Congress. It's now become a major event, renamed as the Power to Make a Difference. Also, she has supported women in their quest for other awards. This has not only encouraged women to be more ambitious, but also generated publicity for our organisation. Prompted by a majority vote for review taken in Lucerne, NOC, together with the task force of the executive, accomplished an organisation and reform review. Many of the recommendations in the 70-page report of that study appeared as constitution amendments or resolution in the business session not chaired in Mexico. A key measure was the adoption of Resolution 26 with its commitment to review and prepare a new modern streamlined constitution. It calls one person to say, we need running boots, not concrete. We need running shoes, not concrete boots. And the overall approval of the Resolution 26 at Mexico meeting introduced a 3-year plan for a constitution review task force to work on a simpler constitution, which will be supported with bylaws, policies and procedures. No wonder her theme for the Congress was Power to Make a Difference. It was in the next term, 2008 to 2011, when Liz Benham of BPW USA was president, that this task force came together, chaired by the Executive Secretary, Jean Murray, democratically engaging members in all the regions, using the expertise of different legal systems and native speakers of all the official languages to ensure that the documentation could be easily translated and also sufficiently broad to permit affiliates to operate in their own cultures. This enormous task started with a comprehensive discussion paper, seeking comments and questions, and had the widest possible consultation with workshops held in every region. The first draft was then posted on the international website. Advice was sought from expert panels, all within the time frame of the 3 years, to produce the proposed draft constitution at next Congress in Helsinki. 2008 to 2011 was again another dynamic triennium with some key BPW action, prompting Liz Benham to continue a theme of power to make a difference. The first Young BPW website was launched. The BPW International website relaunched, including the integration of a bi-weekly electronic news. A new feature was on the website was Woman of the Week, which was highlighting the personal achievements of members. And in 2009, Liz launched an Equal Pay Day awareness campaign, calling on BPW affiliates who did not have an Equal Pay Day to start one. To make their efforts more visible, BPW Germany and Switzerland developed their Red Bag awareness campaign, which certainly raised the profile. Among Liz's other new initiatives in 2009 was an event held immediately ahead of the Commission on the Status of Women in New York. With more BPW members coming to CSW and participating in the parallel and side events, it seemed right for BPW to hold its own 2-day event. So the BPW President's Seminar was inaugurated. This has continued successfully, and in turn became the Leaders Summit and more recently the Leadership Summit. BPW delegates traditionally met together to acknowledge the work of the permanent representatives at the UN headquarters and commissions. 2009 was the year when the Dr. Claire Future Dinner was inaugurated to honour Claire and her 30 years dedicated service at the UN. It was a special occasion in 2010, the next year, when it was combined with the 80 years IFBPW celebrations. 210 was also an important year when it marked 15 years after the Women's Fourth World Conference in Beijing. It was a year when WEPs, Women's Development Principles, were introduced, offering guidance to business on how to promote gender equality and women's empowerment in the workplace, marketplace, and the community. For President Liz and the Vice President UN, Frida Michaelis, it was encouraging to attend the launch of the principles in the company of CEOs of major corporations. By the end of that term, 180 CEOs had signed up. They felt this was an initiative would help propel BPW members in all countries into boardrooms or raise their profile in government, industry, and trade. 2010 was also a year of reform within the UN. For many years, the UN had faced serious challenges in its efforts to promote gender equality globally, including inadequate funding and no recognised driver on gender equality issues. In July, the General Assembly took the step of creating UN Women, short for the UN Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, merging the work of the four previously distinct parts of the UN. Frida Michaelis of Australia came to the presidency in 2011 with the experience of formerly serving as Executive Secretary and Vice President. The new, simple, briefer Constitution and regulations adopted in Helsinki, given its first test in this triennium. And Regulation 21 of this new government set out the need for a procedure manual. That's the operating instructions for implementing the Constitution. However, although the draft of the procedure manual was presented in Helsinki, it was not totally ready for approval at the meeting. It was completed and handed over by Jean Marie in October that year. Developing key partnerships was a spur for Frida, and one aspect she developed was bolstering partnership with all the UN agencies. Working with the Zonta International President, they brought together the presidents and vice presidents of all the international non-governmental organizations with a first meeting at CSW 57 in New York. They discussed common issues and possible collaborations. New partnerships for BPW International were formed. Ambassadors were introduced to raise awareness and help promote the Congress. Dr. Anne Hilty came forward to co-chair the task force. Sustainability was becoming increasingly important, and to look at how we were performing and what we should be doing, the Fulfilling the Legacy 211 to 215 Sustainability Report produced. There was discussion about Project 50 with the thought of a relaunch in 2015 when it would reach its 30 years. That was dear to my heart, as in 2006, I had been privileged to write the Project 50 history with its title of Empowering Women Worldwide. During her term, Frida did much to modernise the administration to better support the President and Executive by appointing Angela MacLeod as UN Administrator and Anne Swain as the Assistant Secretary managing member services. Frida came to the end of her term in Jeju, Korea, in 2014, when we were introduced to the planning and organising skills of Dr. Anne Hilty, who was the Congress organiser of the event. The business session looked at the new modern constitution adopted in Helsinki and dealt with simply tidying up measures. One notable organisational action was approved with a resolution for the standing committees to stand aside for one term. This was to allow a pilot project to be trialled throughout the period 2014 to 2020 for new arrangements and procedures for BPW International projects. Reports on this and proposals for change at the 2021 General Assembly brought back the standing committees which allowed elections to go ahead, as well as the project's trial to continue. Our next Congress venue was Cairo in 2017. Success at last in hosting the Congress after many applications BPW Egypt had made. In the chair was Yasmin Darwich, Mexico, at the end of her term, having been elected in 2014 in Jeju after considerable experience in BPW and serving on the international executive as both a regional coordinator and executive secretary. Excuse me a moment, I'm getting dry. With the support of her executive, her objectives have been to increase effective communication and member participation, promote and support women, achieve effective sustainability for the organisation and encourage membership, which is what we all hope people will do. 2015 was the 20th anniversary of Beijing, so CSW that year was special. The celebration combined with the BPW 85th anniversary and a number of extra events, so I was glad to be there that year. The one disappointment for everyone who had lobbied for it was that no conference was ever held to match the power of the world conferences. We still have a long way to go to achieve the goals in the 12 critical areas. Leaders Summit in New York has continued with strong support from many affiliates, and in both 2016 and 2017, BPW awarded 10 registration scholarships to young BPW members to attend. Yasmin expressed our special gratitude when in 2017, Mrs. Lisa then, who was the chair of the philanthropic task force, together with her own foundation, added the donation of 10 more registration scholarships. The generosity of Mrs. Lin continued with a gift of $130,000 to the Project 50 nursing school in La Paz, Mexico. The school, now named in the honor of the coordinator, Professor Sylvia Salazar, has been in operation and developing over many years. But this gift was given to cover the cost of completing the construction of a much needed auditorium. Mrs. Ling was warmly thanked and attended the opening ceremony with President Yasmin. Throughout the triennium, Yasmin worked very closely with her first Vice President, Amani Asfour. In the UK, we were privileged when they paid us a joint visit to discuss and agree that BPW International would sign a memorandum of understanding with the Royal Society of Public Health. Then we took our international guests to the Houses of Parliament to hear the historic debate for the Europeans would be interesting, as it was for the UK to leave the European Union. Cairo Conference was held in the Mina House Hotel in the shadow of the pyramids, under the patronage of the President of the Arab Republic of Egypt, with various tight security provided. The opening ceremony was held at the foot of the pyramids, still with red carpet treatment in front of the Sphinx, with a fabulous dinner, a spectacular concert and light show. This was the first Congress that approved slimmed-down constitution regulations and its partner documentation. The procedure manual would be used. Approved and agreed in January 2017 and following constitution amendments at the Cairo General Assembly, it became fully operative. This is now clearly defined business sessions as the General Assembly and the separate seminar and workshops program and the social events. With those, it constitutes Congress, which in Cairo had the title of Making a Difference Through Leadership and Action. The days were filled with lengthy business sessions, workshops and seminars, all of which will appear in the proceedings. The social events were in some spectacular historic venues. They were fabulous, even if it took an hour's journey in a bus to get to each one. The ending of the 29th Congress brought another landmark for BPW. Dr. Mani Asfour was elected as the next international president, the first woman for Egypt and the Arab world to hold that role. So we had an extended triennium then, from 2007 and went through to March 2021. Mani Asfour brought BPW to Egypt when she founded the Cairo Club in 2000 and worked to make it a federation in 2005. She became the regional coordinator Africa and in the previous term had been the first vice president membership before her presidency began in 2017. Despite her various commitments in other organizations, many of them in Africa, she traveled widely to affiliate countries and took as her mission empowering women to realize the Sustainable Development Goals. For this, she launched the BPW International Projects Booklet and SDD calendar, encouraging members to work on the projects to achieve the realization of the goals. The 2020 International Congress, scheduled to be in Orlando, USA, but a dispute between the president and BPW USA about this venue, which had been in planning for 2 years, led to a delay. Then COVID changed everything around the world, and a decision to postpone and eventually cancel Orlando as the venue had to be taken. With a global lockdown and no face-to-face communication, we discovered Zoom and other forms of online communication to carry on the business of BPW. However constrained that was at times. There was another lengthy period of consideration before a decision was made to have the General Assembly on Zoom in the spring 2021 over the period 16th to 31st of March. The full representation was allowed in the General Assembly room using online voting and another room provided for observers. We all have our opinions about the success or not of that, but it happened and a new executive team and standing committee chairs were elected to go forward in this triennium. Of the 19 resolutions that have been submitted, 2 internal resolutions were voted upon, 10 external resolutions were presented without debate, with 2 passed as amended and 8 without amendment, and 1 not presented, as it had depended on another motion failing. Vicky Mee, the chair of resolutions, has made some recommendations on those not presented or debated to be included automatically the next GA, and we'll see if that happens. As the constitutional chair, I was only able to present 2 submissions from the proposed 25 amendments on the agenda and none of the 16 proposals for the procedure manual. A motion on Regulation 15 on the agenda was withdrawn by the proposer, Antoinette Ruegg. So the BPW for now ends there. The work of this triennium is in the present, goes into the future history. Throughout this whole period, we need to remember all the excellent speakers, great events, the hours of work and tremendous efforts, especially our place at the UN, that have contributed to making this organisation a force for women. Too much to record today, but a source of pride for us all. Despite the recent sorrow in not having face-to-face contact, it has an upside of getting to know many more people on Zoom, making contacts and friends, having opportunities for webinars and meetings, so that even in lockdown, there was some contact, exchange of ideas, and new friends with whom we perhaps will soon be able to reconnect in person and move ahead, make more great history. Thank you for listening.
Sylvia, thank you so much. There's a round of silent applause going on. This wonderful world we live in. So we all really appreciate that. Many of us have lived through a lot of those events, but I think I can probably speak for many in the room in saying that a lot of the things you touched on, I was not aware of, even though I was around during all of that time, or most of that time. So I too have been enlightened, and I think probably everyone has. So thank you so much for that. I want to also mention, because I didn't in the introduction, and that was my failure, that in addition to, or maybe in conjunction with your having been on the History Committee, of course, you mentioned the Constitutional Advisory Committee as well, but also there were the 2 books that you have worked to see published on our history as well. So you might want to mention something more about those if you wouldn't mind. And I probably am still leaving out several things. Your accomplishments within BPW and your contribution is just unparalleled. So thank you for all of it. Would you just say a word or 2 about those books that I just referenced? I'm not sure that they're available to anyone at this point. I'm not sure, maybe you could tell us, but tell us a bit more about those books that you helped to compile.
Well, I'll tell you how we came to do the Esther Heimer. She was an icon, a mentor for us all who went to CSW and knew her well, and she was such fun too. And she was of course one of the 3 women who were at the signing of the United Nations Charter in San Francisco, and was awarded by Kofi Annan for that. So we felt, Liv and I talked about it a lot, and we felt that it shouldn't go to waste. It should be known what her life was. And it was a bit sticky getting the permission from her daughter, and the particular photograph I want to use on the cover, she wouldn't allow that. So we had those difficulties. But Livia and I got together, and we used to spend in those days weekends in the office, because we had a bedroom there, and so and I had a car park president. I think I was the only one who used the car parking space, because I was probably the only president in UK at that time, but it was very useful for me to be able to drive to London so often. And so we spent one weekend, and it was a memorable weekend, and I'll tell you why about that in a minute, in the office. And I had done a lot of sifting through all the documentation in the build-up to that, so we had a lot of stuff all together that we could use, and we sat and we chatted and decided on our framework. So we literally sat there and did that, the whole framework that I could take home, and taking Livia back to the station to catch her train to Gatwick, because we'd been closeted in the office all the weekend. there was this notice, placard, saying that Princess Diana died. So it had resonance there. And driving home, I could see all that done. So over the next 6 weeks, and I think Vivian the next came within that 6 weeks and came to Bristol. We had another session here. So we practically, and Judith is very kindly holding it up there. And we wrote it in those 6 weeks. And then Livia got it translated into Italian. And Livia and I still hold the copyright for that book. So I sometime I'll have to make sure I make that over to somebody. Yeah.
So, thank you.
But
you mentioned The Office and part. Sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah. No, go on. You want to ask about The Office? Yeah.
I wanted to ask, just to mention that until just a few years ago, BPW did maintain an office in London and then decided the better of it. But when you mentioned The Office, that was actually our official office. You, though, also contributed to compiling a couple of books on our history, and that was also what I was thinking about. You didn't write them, I think you told me, but you helped to compile them.
Oh, yes. The Taylors wrote them. John Taylor was the son of our Clarence Taylor, who had been the treasurer of IFBPW, and his wife did all that. But I used to go to London and sit with them and sift through papers and talk to them about what I knew and how we would look into things. So yes, we did that then. Yes, and that was published in time for the Venice Conference, which of course was when I became president, and it all was wrapped up too with Livia as well there.
Lovely. Okay, we're going to open the floor now to anybody who has questions, comments, or contributions. I suppose comments and contributions could go together. So anything you want to add to the mix or questions for Sylvia, now is your chance. I'm going to recognize Joe first, but before I hand it over to you, Joe, I want to just mention to people, if you can find the reactions icon, which should be probably at the bottom of your screen, and click on that for its menu. One of those will be the raise hand function. Be careful not to click on the one that looks like applauding hands, because that's what it is and it will disappear. So click on the one that says raise hand function. So Joe, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. And firstly, we are extremely proud that Sylvia is from the UK. And I think she, without mentioning, many people know the background room she does to help us and to assist in our knowledge and to pass some of this knowledge down to us. But here in the UK, it's much easier because we have her literally around the corner, which is wonderful. But my question is, all of this history, where is it stored and how can we get access to it? And the second part of my question is, I have been asked by members how they can obtain these books. So are you considering a second run of publication, please?
Well, answering that question first, I think that would have to be a matter of discussion with Catherine, on that one. But the archives, and I still think they're there. Although there was some talk about them being moved, there's a women's museum in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and I never got there. But of course, Catherine has been there, and that's where they're stored. I don't know if any of them are in London, because the UK files theirs in the Women's University in London library, which is where we send everything there, because you're supposed to send all publications that are published. A copy of that has to be entered into archives. That's a standard thing. But we have done that. And in actual fact, I've just been sorting through a lot of papers, and I've got some various papers that I want to contribute to the archives. So I think Catherine Bossart is president, but she's also chair of the archives committee. So I can follow that up with her, because I do need to talk to her about some of these papers I have as well. So I'll let you know.
Thank
watch
you.
Watch this space.
Yeah, thank you. I think to be able to move forward, we need to have a nod to the back of our history, and I think new members need to know this so we know how to progress. But thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe, and thanks, Sylvia. And we need someone willing to take on that project to write the history of BPW. I am not volunteering. I did not put up my hand, but it would be great if we could find someone willing to do that. It's a huge task.
Yes, I was supposed to do that, and offered to do that, but time has gone on, and you do need a lot of time, whatever, and you would need to consult some of those documentations. But I'm trying to actually put down in writing, so that as much as I can, because I must be one of the oldest members of IBPW now, who's been through a lot of these experiences. So that's my mission really at the moment, to try and do that. If you haven't got another question, can I just tell you just something that I was talking with Lynn Everson this week, who does our proceedings, the UK member, but she's got this firm, and she's been doing the transcribing of the proceedings for a number of congresses. And she and I, and it was her first actual congress, although she knows a lot about the congresses from the written records she deals with. It was the first time she'd been to a congress, so we went to Jeju together, and he was BPW UK president at the time, and so I did write a little piece up about that, because of what we talked about this week. I thought I'll write that down while we've been talking. So I did do that, and so I'll just read it to you if you like. We spent a couple of days in Seoul on our way, and on our first evening, we decided to explore the neighbourhood and ended up in a local restaurant. The menu looked exciting, with pictures of the meals alongside the wording, no doubt to help foreign visitors. Despite Lynn being a linguist in a number of languages, even she did not know Korean, so we each indicated our choice, only to see a look of horror on our waiter's face. We were not equipped to ask why. It was just a pointing game. He came back with the only English speaker in the place, who explained that this was a sharing restaurant, and each meal was very ample for two people to share. So rather than to be thought greedy, we retreated, quite embarrassed, to just one choice, but 2 forks. Our next experience was in the most enormous market either of us had seen, where there were some wonderful things to buy, especially typical and well-made clothes. However, that was definitely a no-no, as they were half the size we would need to fit us. Finally, having got lost in the streets around, we were kindly escorted back to our hotel by young police cadets out on a training exercise. We had a laugh about that, because it was such fun being so helpless in a foreign country. Usually when you go, you've got a few words of everything, but Korea was definitely not it. You might have done better, Anne, with your experiences there.
10 years of living there, yes. So, okay, great. Thank you, Sylvia. We do have Sue now in the queue. So, Sue, I'll turn it to you. Sue, go ahead. You're still on mute, though. Can you? There we go.
Myself. That's fine. Sorry, I wasn't quite sure if it was you doing it or me doing it. I'm a great believer in looking back to go forward. So this has been, all your sessions have been invaluable, but also enlightening for us. I'm going to ask a bit of a cheeky question now. So what do you think is going to be the next big challenge for women, not just in the workplace, but globally?
Well, I think they've got to get things back. I think women are losing things. And that's been confirmed to me by conversations with a couple of people who are feeling quite desperate about the situation in their country. I think we've seen a lot, and Francesca, you'll probably confirm this. Things are not happening in your country that aren't very nice. This abortion business and other things, and going back to the, you know, pushing women back to where we were. We seem to be losing some of the things we've gained, and I don't know if anybody else has got thoughts on that. But that's what I read wherever I read people talking about their current situations.
Certainly what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. I met a lady from Ukraine on Tuesday, and she was saying that the amount of sexual abuse that's going on to the refugees coming from Ukraine into various other countries, and that is just horrendous at the moment. So rape is still being used as a war crime. So I agree with you. I think it's, you know, there is a lot of things that we need to recoup.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Francesca?
Good morning, good afternoon. Yes, Sylvia, it's very frightening to be living here in this country right now, because there is a big fear about our democracy as a whole. You know, it's like insane to be here. And just getting back from Iceland, where I felt so safe, you know, returning to this chaos. And, you know, women, back about 10 years ago, one of the women in the United States made a film, Equal Means Equal. And in that film, it was very interesting. It was tracing the women's movement. And there was one woman that was interviewed that said something that really stuck with me. Women have a tendency to go, back then, women had a tendency to get together, have a, you know, fight the issue, and then disappear. And now that doesn't happen, we don't disappear. But women, as she pointed out in that video, have a tendency to drop their own cause. We do this every day in our lives, and fight for someone else's cause. So women have a tendency to do that individually and as a group. And now with all the other issues that have arisen with so many other groups, women's voices for women are not being heard anymore. Or if they are, it's very faint. So that too bothers me a great deal. You know, we're willing to fight for everyone else, to stand up for everyone else, and to lose the women's voice for women's issues. So that's in connection to what you said, Sylvia. But my question to you, Sylvia, about BPW, not that I want to move off this, but I forgot to ask it the last time you spoke. You know, BPW is really our legal name. And then somewhere along the way, this BPW International happened, you know, that name. And I'm wondering, what was the reason behind it? Because Lena Madison Phillips started in the United States, as we all know, with the National Federation of Women and the National Federation of Business and Professional Women's Clubs, because women didn't have professional associations then, we just had clubs. And then 11 years later, went to the International Federation of Business and Professional Women and dropped the clubs, thank God. So how did we then become BPW International? I didn't understand how that decision got made.
Well, you'll find that the actual wording that says is the International Federation of Business and Professional Women, also known as BPW International. So we have the two, and it was thought that people wanted to bring in BPW International as a kind of more informal name, although we were protecting our original name, and it was easier to say and to write and to explain to people. Although it's really, the full title is still there, it's Business and Professional Women International, but the BPW International was so that one could use it easily. But our real name is still in IFBPW. And so we brought that in on a I don't know, it was a resolution, I suppose it was a constitutional amendment. I can't remember how we did it first, yeah, but it was amended in the Constitution. Oh,
thank you for that, because I've always wondered about that.
And that, it says it on the front of the Constitution. IFB, International Federation of Business and Professional, also known as. Yeah.
And Sylvia, I would really love for you to get your books back in print. I so enjoyed The Bust of 42nd Street. You know, I've self-published. I'm willing to help you do that in any way I can. But I mean, that book, Liz Benham gave me that book when I became a UN rep. And it is such an inspiring book. And we don't know all of this history. You know, when we bring people in, we don't spend enough time on this very rich history we have. I would love to give new members that book.
Well, the thing is, of course, as I said, we do have the copyright to it. And I don't know how it'll tick on as part of Livia's estate, so we have to talk about that. But the other book, of course, I was asked to write that for the 50 group. Yes, so of which I was a member once, as you are when you're president. But now we're not 50 any longer, are we?
It disappeared.
Yeah.
But that was another great book that I got. And you're our historian, really.
Well, I don't think Catherine would see that, but because I mean, she knows a lot about the history as well. But I think I'll give her a few years.
Okay.
And some advantages of age I discovered.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, Francesca. Thank you, Francesca. We have just a few more minutes and I have Vicky in line. And I want to just ask before I turn it to you, Vicky, Anu, are you actually with us? I know Anu is at work and her screen is off at the moment. Anu? Great.
I saw her.
Okay. So she can't talk to us. Okay. I was going to ask you to say a couple of words about the European conference that just ended. But if you cannot speak, then I will ask Francesca that you can speak. Okay.
Francesca, no, I will not speak. Thank you very much for asking me, and hello to everyone. But Joe Kinsey was there and Francesca was there. Maybe Joe Kinsey can tell a few words.
And Nalima was there. Nalima was there as well.
Thank you, Anu. Okay, so I'll have one of you, but first I'm going to turn it over to Vicky. And Vicky, you'll be our last commenter. And then Joe, in deference to the fact that our main speaker today is from the Federation where you are currently the president, I'll ask you to say a few words about Europe. But Vicky, first to you.
So I think I'm coming from the point of view, Sylvia, just looking at all the resolutions that became policy over the years, whether there's a possible stream that someone, because that's what I'm really interested in, is how we actually, as advocates for women, changed things in countries or in the through the UN, and whether that sort of advocacy history and how we used our policy is something that anyone is looking at. So I totally agree we need the full history, but I just see a stream of women as activists through BPW, whether that is being written anywhere, because I know that's what inspires many of our young women. And they say, if you can do that, then I want to be part of it. And so it's more a comment.
Yeah, that's a funny thing, because I was looking through all the different resolutions from the different years to see what common themes. And of course, your country, your federation is really hogged it really with the resolutions. You come up with some great ones all the time. But and what I was so interested in, Vicky, is that we don't have the feedback from some of those what federations are doing or clubs are doing, and also how the topics that 20 years ago are still coming up the same. It's what we were talking about earlier, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you, Vicky.
So thank you. It's just really a comment and a gap, I think.
Yeah, I think we should talk about it a bit more. I think we'll talk about that a bit more. Yeah.
And having seen, when I was in New Zealand, the book of all of your past resolutions, that enormous history, just to see the titles of the resolutions, page after page after page, is very impressive. Of course, you're more than 100 years now, so that's a pretty big book. I have gone through it. And that would be something that could be easily lifted, at least in terms of the titles, from all of our Congress proceedings. And just to put the external resolutions together in one format, one document, would be a starting point, I think, to just be able to see all of the external resolutions from around the world that have been proposed and accepted over the years. So not Francesca, sorry. Joe, I had a few of you on my list for this last bit. Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you for just a few words about, because we are at the end of our time, so just a few words about the European Conference.
It was amazing. It was amazing to be in person, to not have to say you're still on mute, and to actually remember our networking and the thing that we are so great at. We are so great at talking about these things and then going back to our countries. My thanks really goes to Johanna, the president of Iceland. They arranged a fantastic European conference, and it was expertly managed by Anu and Carmen, and Gudrun is always good value, and we're very lucky to have her as our European treasurer. So we had an amazing president's meeting, really productive, led into our leaders summit, which was great, and I was on a team with people from various countries, not just Europe. So 3 years' time, it's BPW Malta that are hosting, but at the moment we're still processing what Iceland did, and it was a fantastic conference.
Great, thank you so much, Joe, for that recap. And at least we got to see Anu's face for a minute there too, so and to hear briefly from her. So I want to bring this to a close now. We try to end as close to on time as possible because we are all busy women by definition. And we thank you all for taking an hour out of your day to be with us today. As always, we want to thank primarily, all of you, of course, but primarily our speaker. And Sylvia, not only for your contribution today, your contribution in the previous webinar you did for us a few months back in March on this same topic in the middle years of BPW, and your contributions that are simply astounding to this organization throughout time. So we thank you for all of that, and I'm sure there's more to come, but we certainly thank you up to this very red hot moment. So we will be here again next month. It's always the second Wednesday of the month, and we invite you to come back again and again and again. I see lots of familiar faces in the room, so one more thank you. I hope you're enjoying your summer or winter if you're down below that equator, and we will meet again very soon. Bye for now.
Okay, bye. Thank you.